One dare accepted, one safety rule ignored, one split-second miscalculation. That's all it took to transform 5 ordinary challenges into death sentences that no amount of confidence or experience could prevent. These stories reveal how quickly bravado becomes tragedy when the margin for error disappears completely. It was June 3rd, 2018. When the waters off the Florida Keys turned deadly for a young videographer seeking the ultimate underwater challenge. The morning brought calm seas, clear visibility down 80 feet, 78-degree water, and minimal current, where a privately owned shark cage hung above the reef, its rusted bars showing unsupervised wear. Gemma Hart, 29, had built her career documenting extreme adventures for online audiences. The freelance travel videographer possessed an insatiable drive for increasingly dangerous content, often pushing boundaries that more cautious creators avoided. Her competitive nature had led her to this remote location with 2 friends operating a 24-foot private vessel. Her friends had challenged her to attempt an underwater endurance test that would push the limits of both her physical capabilities and content creation. The dare involved entering a shark cage with severely limited air supply and escaping before running out of oxygen. The challenge parameters were straightforward, yet perilous. Gemma would enter the cage carrying only a small emergency air bottle designed for brief underwater emergencies. The cage door would be secured from outside using a padlock and an improvised external latch system, making internal escape impossible through normal means. Success required forcing an exit before the limited air supply ran out. Previous users had left their mark on the cage. Several vertical bars near the door hinge showed significant bending, creating gaps that might allow a determined person to squeeze through. Exposed metal edges displayed sharp, corroded surfaces where protective coatings had worn away. Gemma descended into the cage as her friends secured the door from above. The small emergency air bottle was designed to provide only a few minutes of breathing time under ideal conditions, a window significantly reduced by stress and exertion. 4 minutes elapsed as the air supply entered its final reserves. Bubble output from her regulator decreased noticeably, and her breathing pattern became rapid and shallow. She moved toward the cage door and began working at the bent bars near the hinge, using her body weight to widen the existing gap. The corroded metal shifted under pressure, but as she forced her way through the opening, her left forearm scraped against a jagged, rusted edge. The sharp metal tore through skin and muscle tissue, opening a deep laceration that immediately began bleeding into the surrounding water. She pushed herself completely out of the cage and reached for the external latch mechanism, leaving a trail of blood dispersing through the water column. The injury, combined with oxygen depletion, severely impaired her coordination and grip strength. A bull shark patrolling below the reef reacted to the sudden turbulence and erratic movement near the cage, turning upward as the scent of blood dispersed through the water. The predator accelerated upward toward the source. The first bite clamped down on Gemma's already injured forearm, inflicting severe trauma that disabled her ability to grip the cage. The force pulled her sideways and away from the cage opening. She attempted to fight back, but the shark's grip was absolute. A second bite struck her upper left thigh, causing catastrophic vascular damage later consistent with femoral artery trauma. A rapidly expanding blood cloud spread through the water as her blood loss became immediate and severe. She tried to kick back toward the cage but lost strength and coordination within seconds. Within moments, her strength collapsed as rapid blood loss and oxygen deprivation overwhelmed her body, and she lost consciousness shortly afterward. Her friends above realized something was wrong when they saw the blood cloud expanding beneath the boat. Emergency responders arrived 23 minutes later, but recovery efforts confirmed what the evidence already indicated. The medical examiner determined that Gemma died from rapid exsanguination after the femoral artery was severed. The challenge equipment remained in place, with the cage door hanging open and her depleted air bottle still inside. Investigators interviewed the friends who organized the challenge, and the death was ruled accidental, with no criminal charges filed. The incident highlighted the extreme risks of unsupervised underwater challenges in predator habitats, particularly when blood enters the water column. While Gemma's tragedy unfolded in open water, Dean Fletcher's fatal mistake would occur in what appeared to be the safest possible environment, an abandoned building where nothing should have posed any threat. It was August 14, 2016, when an abandoned distribution switching building in Gary, Indiana, became the site of a fatal miscalculation that would claim the life of a young maintenance worker. The evening brought humid air and temperatures in the mid-80s as darkness settled over the industrial district near unused railway tracks. A chain-link fence surrounded a small utility structure, its gate hanging open where vandals had cut through the metal links weeks earlier. The concrete building stood roughly 20 feet square, with weathered walls and broken windows. Inside, aging distribution switchgear and control panels lined one wall, their metal covers either missing or hanging at odd angles. Dust and debris covered most surfaces, giving the impression of long abandonment. Dean Fletcher, 27, worked as a general maintenance laborer for a local contractor, spending his days repairing equipment and troubleshooting basic electrical issues. His personality leaned heavily toward proving others wrong, especially when friends questioned his technical knowledge. 3 former high school classmates accompanied Dean to the site, drawn by curiosity about the abandoned infrastructure. The group had been drinking earlier in the evening, though not heavily enough to impair basic judgment. Using phone flashlights, they examined the interior of the building. One electrical panel caught their attention immediately. The metal cover hung open, revealing a maze of wires and connections inside. Most cables appeared old and corroded, but one thick incoming feeder line had lost part of its protective sheath, exposing several inches of bare copper conductor. Dean examined the exposed wire closely, noting the dust accumulation and general deterioration of the surrounding equipment. He insisted the entire facility had been deactivated years ago when the railway operation ceased. His friends expressed doubt about his claims and dared him to prove the electrical system was truly dead. They challenged him to touch the exposed wire, insisting that if he was so confident about his electrical knowledge, he should demonstrate it. This direct challenge triggered Dean's competitive instincts completely. Dean accepted the dare and proposed touching the exposed copper for exactly 1 second to prove the line carried no current. His friends agreed this would settle the debate about whether the building still had power. Dean positioned himself directly in front of the open panel and extended his right hand toward the exposed conductor. His friends stepped back several feet, using their phone lights to illuminate the area. Contact occurred when his palm touched the bare copper wire. The line was still energized at approximately 7,200 volts, part of an active distribution system, with his body providing a path to ground through the concrete floor. Electrical current entered through his palm and immediately caused tetanic muscle contraction throughout his arm. His hand locked onto the wire in an involuntary grip that he could not release. The current pathway continued down through his torso and exited through his legs into the concrete floor. His arms straightened and became rigid as the electrical energy overwhelmed his nervous system. Chest muscles seized within seconds, making normal breathing impossible. The smell of burning tissue filled the air as the current created deep electrical burns at both entry and exit points. Sparks began arcing at the contact point between his palm and the copper conductor. The electrical fault eventually triggered an upstream protective device on the distribution line, cutting power after a brief but lethal interval. Dean collapsed to the concrete floor only after the current stopped flowing. His friends immediately called emergency services, but he remained unresponsive throughout their attempts at basic first aid. Paramedics arrived approximately 11 minutes later and found Dean in cardiac arrest with full-thickness electrical burns on his right hand and both feet. Resuscitation efforts continued for 23 minutes without success. The medical examiner determined that death resulted from high-voltage electrocution, causing immediate cardiac arrhythmia, followed by respiratory arrest. Investigation revealed that the utility building remained partially connected to the electrical grid to power monitoring equipment. Authorities determined the death was accidental and no criminal charges were filed against the others present. We've got more disturbing, dare-gone-wrong tragedies coming up. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see how one reckless challenge can turn fatal in seconds. It was September 11, 2015, when a concrete drainage canal in Bakersfield, California, became the scene of a tragic accident that would end the life of a college student attempting an ambitious trick shot. The afternoon brought clear skies and 89-degree heat across the Central Valley. A concrete drainage canal cut through the industrial outskirts, empty during dry months. The channel spanned roughly 40 feet, its sloped sides dropping 18 feet to a shallow basin. Dust, loose gravel, and debris lined the unprotected concrete lip. Brooks Noble, 21, split his time between community college classes and part-time retail work at a local sporting goods store. His athletic background included high school basketball, though he never played at the collegiate level. Brooks possessed an impulsive personality and consistently sought opportunities to impress his peer group. 4 friends accompanied Brooks to the canal, drawn by the unique concrete geometry that resembled an oversized basketball court. They had brought a regulation basketball and planned to film various trick shots using the elevated concrete edges as launching points. Initial attempts involved standard shots from the canal's edge, with the basketball arcing down toward the concrete basin below. Brooks quickly grew bored with stationary attempts. One of his friends dared him to attempt something more spectacular, a running jump shot that would combine athleticism with the dramatic height of the canal. The friend insisted that Brooks's basketball background made him the perfect candidate to pull off such a stunt, challenging him to prove his skills were still sharp. This direct dare appealed to Brooks's competitive nature. The modified challenge involved a running approach along the canal's edge, followed by a jump shot released at the moment of takeoff. His friends positioned themselves to capture the attempt from multiple angles. Brooks selected a starting point roughly 15 feet back from the canal's edge. The concrete surface appeared solid, though loose gravel and dust had accumulated along the lip where he planned to launch. He began his approach at a moderate pace, dribbling the basketball while building momentum toward the takeoff point. As he neared the edge, he planted his left foot firmly and prepared to launch with his right leg while simultaneously releasing the ball in a high arc. His right foot contacted the loose gravel at the exact moment of takeoff. The unstable surface shifted under his weight, causing his foot to slip sideways rather than providing the expected upward thrust. His planned trajectory immediately went wrong as his balance failed. Instead of launching upward and backward in a controlled jump, Brooks pitched forward over the canal's edge. His body began rotating as gravity took control, with his head dropping below his feet during the fall. He struck the concrete slope head first, approximately 8 feet down from the rim. The impact occurred at an angle that drove his neck into severe hyperflexion, fracturing multiple cervical vertebrae. The force of the collision was sufficient to cause immediate spinal cord damage. Momentum from the fall carried his body down the remaining slope into the shallow water at the canal's bottom. He came to rest, face down, in roughly 6 inches of stagnant water, completely motionless. His friends immediately recognized the severity of the situation and called emergency services while attempting to reach him. The steep concrete slope made rapid descent difficult, and they were forced to find an access point nearly 200 yards away. Emergency responders arrived 14 minutes after the initial call and found Brooks unresponsive in the shallow water. Paramedics confirmed no pulse or breathing upon their arrival. The medical examiner determined that death resulted from a complete cervical spine fracture, causing immediate paralysis of the respiratory muscles, leading to respiratory failure and subsequent cardiac arrest. The impact caused catastrophic spinal cord injury. Investigation revealed that Brooks struck the concrete slope at a velocity consistent with a short freefall, combined with forward momentum, generating forces well beyond what the human neck could withstand. Authorities interviewed the friends who witnessed the incident and ruled the death a fatal accident, with no criminal charges filed. Brooks fell victim to gravity and concrete, but Iris Thorne would discover that fire shows no mercy to those who underestimate its unpredictable nature. It was October 7, 2015, when a backyard gathering in the rural outskirts of Boise, Idaho, turned deadly for a young event assistant who accepted one dare too many. The evening brought crisp autumn air with temperatures in the low 50s as darkness settled over the countryside. A light, intermittent breeze stirred fallen leaves and shifted smoke across several acres of dry grass. At the center of the patio, a raised metal fire pit smoldered, its embers glowing with occasional low flames. Iris Thorne, 24, worked part-time as an event assistant for a local catering company, helping coordinate weddings and corporate functions throughout the Boise area. Her outgoing personality made her popular at social gatherings, where she frequently became the center of attention through her willingness to accept physical challenges that others declined. 8 friends had gathered for an informal celebration, sitting in lawn chairs arranged around the fire pit. The group had been drinking moderately throughout the evening, though not to the point of severe impairment. As the night progressed, conversation turned to various dares and challenges, with Iris volunteering for increasingly risky activities. Someone suggested jumping over the fire pit in a single leap, noting that the flames appeared low enough to clear safely. The distance required a jump of roughly 4 feet to clear both the pit and surrounding stone border. Iris examined the challenge and declared it easily achievable. She wore loose-fitting cotton blend pants containing synthetic fibers and a lightweight long-sleeved shirt, both garments flowing freely around her body. Her shoes were canvas sneakers with minimal ankle support. None of her clothing was treated with flame-retardant materials. Iris positioned herself approximately 6 feet back from the fire pit to allow for a running approach. Her friends moved their chairs to create a clear landing zone on the opposite side. The fire appeared stable, with flames reaching only 12 to 18 inches above the rim. She began her approach at a moderate pace, building momentum for the jump. As she planted her left foot for takeoff, a sudden gust of wind swept across the property. The breeze struck the fire pit directly, unnoticed at ground level moments earlier. The wind disturbed loose ash and partially burned wood, exposing unburned fuel and causing flames to surge upward to nearly 3 feet. The timing coincided exactly with Iris reaching the peak of her jump, placing her lower legs directly in the path of the expanded fire. Flames made contact with her cotton pants at mid-calf level as she passed over the pit. The loose fabric ignited rapidly, with fire racing up both legs toward her thighs. The synthetic fibers within the cotton blend material accelerated the burning process. She landed awkwardly on the far side of the pit, her balance compromised by the unexpected contact with fire. As she stumbled and fell onto the dry grass, flames had already spread across most of her lower body and were climbing toward her torso. Her friends immediately rushed to help, but the fire had gained too much momentum. Attempts to smother the flames by rolling proved ineffective, as the loose, fuel-rich clothing continued to burn and melt against her skin. Within moments, flames consumed most of her pants and ignited her shirt. Burns covered both legs completely, with deep tissue damage extending across her abdomen and lower chest. The intense heat caused her to gasp repeatedly, drawing superheated air into her lungs. Emergency services received the call 4 minutes after the incident began. Paramedics arrived 18 minutes later to find Iris conscious but in severe shock from extensive burns covering approximately 65% of her body surface area. She was transported to the Regional Burn Center, where medical staff confirmed full-thickness burns across both legs and partial-thickness burns extending to her torso. Despite aggressive treatment, her condition deteriorated rapidly, and Iris died approximately 7 hours later from burn shock complicated by acute respiratory failure. Authorities interviewed those present and ruled the death a tragic accident, with no criminal charges filed. Iris learned too late that fire can turn deadly in an instant, but Wade Cooper's final lesson would come from 80,000 pounds of rolling steel that recognized no authority but physics. On May 19, 2017, a freight yard access road in Lubbock, Texas, became the site of a fatal accident. Clear skies and 87-degree heat surrounded a cracked asphalt road, sloping 3 degrees downhill, where a fully loaded 80,000-pound semi-truck idled facing downward as its driver completed paperwork inside the cab. Wade Cooper, 34, had spent 8 years working as a warehouse loader for a regional shipping company, handling freight transfers and equipment maintenance. His imposing physical presence and confident demeanor made him a natural leader among his co-workers, though he frequently dismissed safety protocols he considered unnecessary. Wade possessed extensive experience around heavy vehicles, but maintained a casual attitude towards safety procedures. 4 co-workers gathered near the parked truck after their shift, discussing safety and blind spots. Wade dismissed their concerns, insisting professional drivers could always see pedestrians using mirrors. When others cited documented accidents, he proposed a demonstration to prove his point. Wade stepped directly behind the truck, believing the position was safe. He inspected the mirrors and backup alarm, saw nothing unusual, and assumed the parking brakes were fully engaged while the engine idled. No wheel chocks had been placed behind the rear tires, despite this being standard practice for vehicles parked on inclined surfaces. The brake components were later found to be worn and out of adjustment, reducing their ability to hold the fully loaded vehicle on a downhill grade. Wade positioned himself approximately 3 feet directly behind the truck's rear axle assembly, placing him squarely in the center of the vehicle's blind spot. His co-workers moved to safe positions along the roadside. The parking brakes had not been fully engaged. The driver believed the brakes were set, but the trailer brakes were not properly applied, leaving only partial holding force on the incline. Combined with worn, out-of-adjustment brake components and the absence of wheel chocks, the truck's weight overcame the limited braking force and began rolling backward down the slope. Wade realized the truck was moving toward him, but had insufficient time to clear the danger zone. The rear bumper struck him at knee level, knocking him backward onto the asphalt roadway. His legs were immediately caught beneath the rear axle assembly as the truck continued its backward momentum. The dual rear tires rolled over both of his legs at the mid-thigh level, then continued across his pelvis. The crushing force generated by the 80,000-pound vehicle caused immediate and catastrophic fractures to his femurs, pelvis, and lower spine. The truck's differential housing came to rest directly over his torso, pinning him against the asphalt. Internal bleeding began immediately as fractured bone fragments damaged major blood vessels throughout his pelvic region. The weight pressing down on his chest severely restricted his ability to breathe, while shock from the massive trauma caused his blood pressure to drop rapidly. His co-workers immediately shouted to alert the driver, who applied the service brakes and stopped the truck within 8 feet. However, Wade remained pinned beneath the rear axle assembly. Emergency services arrived 12 minutes after the initial call, but Wade had already lost consciousness from blood loss and respiratory distress. Heavy rescue equipment was required to lift the truck and extract him. Paramedics confirmed no vital signs upon gaining access to Wade. The medical examiner determined that death resulted from massive internal hemorrhaging caused by crushing injuries to the pelvis and abdomen, complicated by respiratory failure from chest compression. Investigation revealed that the parking brakes had not been fully engaged and that worn, out-of-adjustment brake components were unable to hold the fully loaded truck on the downhill grade without wheel chocks. Authorities ruled the death accidental, and no criminal charges were filed against the driver or the co-workers present. Investigators noted no evidence that the distinct pop of fully engaged parking brake valves had occurred prior to the incident. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.